Conventions have always been the alternative to Disneyland as a means to express geekdom and love for pop culture, while staff maintain that relevance for many years to come. A few cons that come to mind are ACEN, MagFest, and DragonCon. Many other cons have been able to hold on as long as they could until they cater to the center of the planet later on. Anime Expo, to name one example, which was once a beloved con by many, now has been a verbally toxic and crowded wasteland of a meme in the con scene. Many cons that started out small and new, and even tried to hold on as long as possible, they eventually shut their doors down after a few years after not maintaining that yearly quota or when scrutiny comes into play. One con that's managed to hold on to that relevancy for nearly 2 decades is Matsuricon in Columbus, Ohio. Not to be confused with Anime Matsuri, Holiday Matsuri, and so forth. The con started in 2006 with John Holscher and Nicole Buchanan as the two respective con chairs after dealing with the shit show that was OhioCon regarding volunteering for that con. And it's gone through many phases as time went by, including donating and participating in Pelotonia since John himself has been a cancer survivor since 2009, and that some of the staffers have succumbed to people closest to them facing cancer in general, but has amassed them $128,000 in donations as of this year. And of course, for the people that lost their lives to the various forms of cancer, all of the condolences to those people. While that's one plus as to what Matsuricon does as well as host many events in the area, John's Con has been slowly losing more attendees than usual since their return from COVID, and many of their longtime supporters are losing faith in them as well. Although their sub-base on their social media platforms have been slowly growing, they've been losing more attendees' trust towards them recently. But why are people turning against Matsuricon all of a sudden? Today, I'm going to share why people like myself and others have lost their trust, and how we got to this predicament. For those interested, I have a link in the description with my sources and evidence, as well as my final statement that shares more about my side of being victimized by Matsuricon, as well as other consumers that have spoken up about them as well. But first things first, it's important to note on what drew people's attention to John and his staff in the first place. OhioCon, also located in Columbus, Ohio, was facing scrutiny because of the con chair's unprofessionalism towards her staff, and that's how Matsuricon was birthed. After that happened, John and his staff started their own thing and became that con that knew how to throw a party in front of the consumers. And after collaborating with Funimation for 1 year, the con got the boost that it needed. It was a different era of con going where in the state of Ohio, it was the one con that got the more attention in the same area as OhioCon did. The staff has always been open about their lives as well as from a medical, mental, and hobby perspective in front of the consumers, and built a reputation for wanting to show their support for them, as I plead they do to John and his gang. Matsuricon operates a variety of mini events to simply advertising themselves at other cons. But since the rise of Discord's popularity and when staff started to sign up for their personal social media pages, they become more colorful and outspoken about things, and started sharing personal and political takes, or anything from minor inconveniences to drama, and it's annoyed their audience due to their bad habits for resting on their laurels. Although their laurel resting are what they are criticized for the most, there are other factors that explain their spiraling reputation. But the important question to ask is, who are the people behind Matsuricon? A big draw to the staff, both former and current, is their personality. People thought they were these couple of good eggs that faced many circumstances in some of their lives, and wanted to show as much love and support for the attendees and vice versa. Because their personalities, their personal lives, and their hobbies are intertwined with the yearly events they put out, whether or not you like said events will vary on your view of these people as a part of today's society. Although you might separate other cons from the people who run those shows, it's nearly impossible in the case of Matsuricon. People like to attend cons and interact with staff that are courteous, honest, and trustworthy. They don't like events that put up a public spectacle without holding accountability for their own actions, let alone have their sense of entitlement show. Many people only post stuff related to the con itself without making personal stuff public, and it's not uncommon to let people shift away from that persona in any circumstance. However, a growing faction of longtime supporters decided to turn against John, as well as his staff of the past and present, and the brown-nosers of Matsuricon in general. While some have lost interest with the events they put out, others have pointed out that their persona is used as a veneer for their manipulative tendencies. Lately, it's become impossible to ignore the face behind the mask between who John and his buddies are in the con scene, and who they actually are on social media and in person. But, as previously mentioned, a big part of their personality is that they're supposed to be nice people who knew how to throw a party for a lifetime. A perception of themselves they like to publicize. John himself even went out to say that he was thankful to having big-name guests appear when they could get them, as well as the consumers. However, certain posts and comments have been circulating for years on social media that challenge their positive persona, such as this one where one of John's staffers is horny posting on his own Twitter. And while it's normal in the weeb community as well as humanity in general for people to have a staunch mindset as long as nothing criminal or physically disgusting is done, it's a glaring issue that challenges their family-friendly persona. There's also this tweet where just because Absolute Nar's PNG tuber avatar is that of a deer hybrid, he commented about being all in for that Jägermeister black tea shot, and Eve wants everything to go his way as much as everyone else with volunteer experience. While there are policies on the website that abide by the theme of family friendliness, and there's nothing major about putting this onto the image of Matsuricon in general, this can come off as jarring as to how they behave publicly. But even if you advertise yourself as a family-friendly con, why would one of their staffers publicize some colorful stuff to people who would be curious about posts like these outside of the con? There's a reason people hide stuff privately, John, or at the very least of people closest to them in their circles. There's also this novella post from someone who used to be a part of staff, but was given no explanation as to why they were kicked out after asking in a private group chat as to whether or not a cosplay of theirs would be out of line. And someone was being rude about it overall. But when one of John's staffers commented on the situation, they encouraged this person to give them another chance. When somebody talks about traumatizing events, especially from verbal abuse, telling them to give people second chances in that regard isn't gonna earn back their trust onto their abusers, let alone other people that are a part of this organization of theirs. If anything, it'll make those people hurt by staff to stay further away as well as set up personal boundaries of theirs to keep them safer than usual. Again, all con staff only show the best parts of themselves publicly, but when being asked a simple question and pass verbal hostility rather than genuine criticism along to another person, it's become harder and harder to pinpoint the proper mindset of how to react in certain circumstances on scenes and off scenes, especially given this was a private interaction between staffers, and not to a consumer who knew it would be of concern to others. Another thing that's been deleted on their Discord server is when a former staffer lashes out about masking during COVID's rise in front of me, while I was being visibly scared and overstimulated about the future of the virus, and was sick about hearing the news about it as well, up to the point where I wanted to die from the virus, and even up to the point where if masking became a law that I wanted to break it. I pointed out that while it was nothing more than a devastating circumstance I wanted to tune out of, I also pointed out how disrespectful this cunt was being to me. Especially if this was a conversation between a consumer such as myself and a now former staffer, and not to another staffer who would have a different mindset compared to another. Congoers have also commented on their behavior for being disingenuous. And while I was hanging out with another staffer I had respect for in person, her response to this was to not take her words seriously, in the sense of brown-nosing for one another as a part of the Matsuricon family. While it can come off as a rude and intense nature to think this is okay, choices like these can come off as jarring compared to how they're being advertised as family-friendly. And verbal hostility and intense nature is definitely not family-friendly by any stretch of the imagination. Now that we've talked about some of his former and current staff, let's also talk about the con chair himself and their staff's publicity with hobbies. John's hobbies are that of Final Fantasy and football, something he always gets a chance to talk about in his interviews with Anime on Location regarding the latter. As mentioned previously, Matsuricon's biggest habit of theirs is their constant laurel resting as a supposed crew of family friendliness and consideration. One example that no one batted an eye on is when one of John's staffers suggested to wear Among Us style costumes in order to meet with COVID guidelines. There's gonna be a lot of COVID references here, so I apologize in advance. There's also that one time where they were celebrating the Year of the Dragon for this year, and chose to use the PFP of the Dragon Shiba Inu art from Tasty Peach Studios, or TPS for short, an action which also drew criticism as TPS lost its audience for their racism and poor treatment of staff of the brand, and their alleged transphobia, hence why Ryan Zanfei went from making her art publicly to becoming a VTuber. And when someone commented about the issue, they deleted the comment as part of their damage control to make it as they're innocent rather than admit the mistakes themselves. Now, if it were just a post dedicated to the Year of the Dragon via a small novella, it would have been more than hunky-dory, but to use recycled art from that of a racist being I also had respect for at one point isn't a good business practice either. I also found this tweet that confirms John lets his sense of entitlement show more often than less, especially in this mini-thread about his views of people masking during COVID times. The people who are yelling about oppression when told to put a mask on are the same people who go to see the doctor and gets told that you shouldn't be consuming alcohol, junk food, etc. Their first reaction is, you can't tell me what to do, and then die a few years later from something that could have been prevented by not doing the thing the doctor told them. People ask, what could have been done? Oh, I don't know, listen to the expert. It's not about your freedom, it's about safety. It's not a slippery slope scenario. It's a damn mask. Put it on and prevent people from dying, and we'll get back to normal fast. Do the things you're supposed to do, and not act like a spoiled child who didn't get ice cream. It's good he's stating facts like these, but the glaring issue is because COVID is such a deadly virus and a sensitive topic, and how it negatively impacted people in our society, especially in the con scene. He still chose to vent his frustrations about it since he's both a con chair and a con staffer. But the smarter move would have been to just state the facts in a more civilized manner. In addition to the former and current staff putting up their sense of entitlement publicly as well as privately, John himself has a habit of inserting himself into situations and making it about him. For those who don't know, John staffs for Otakon as a part of guest relations, which the con celebrated its 30th anniversary in 2024, and made it a Final Fantasy-centric con with guests and panels dedicated to his love for the franchise. And some of the people behind 7 Rebirth, to some capacity, they became guests as well. John sent out many tweets before the con started. One of them being this. Finally, I can talk about this. This was 4 months in the making and 100 plus emails. I'm excited that they are announced and I hope the directors have a wonderful time during Otakon weekend. While nobody was upset about this, it comes off as a person that's a part of staff making it more about what they want versus making it a balance for everyone else. And to add insult to injury, he felt the need to brag about how important he was too in a panel. And in the replies of this tweet, the commenters were praising John on a job well done. But even if things ran smoothly for the audience, this is a glaring issue with John and the staff of Matsuricon. They feel the need to insert themselves in the worst way possible by not being courteous of others' voices and feelings, and harassing game developers with 100 plus emails isn't ethical in the slightest. Even if you're a fan and if having guests is narrowed down to a simple yes or no question as to, would you like to come here? That should have had 1 email be written to those people. 2 at the very least. But that's not the only time either. During his college days, he hopped onto the K-pop bandwagon and decided to submit a college course paper based on the medium. And you might be asking what the problem is. Here's the thing. While his paper got praised, he was begging people on Twitter to acknowledge him as a holier-than-thou tyrant in the community. And he still feels the need to let that sense of entitlement show with any guests or merch he comes across, like a spoiled child who wants ice cream. Yeah, I know I used John's words against him, but the point still remains. Especially in relation to Otakon. And in a con that's supposed to be more about that one person in that regard is just a bad look. And his obsessions are so unhealthy to the point where he needs to share everything, let his unrealistic expectations show, and have everything go his way every chance he gets, especially as a cancer survivor. Whether or not he's using cancer as a shield in these instances, I'm not sure, but it's still a deep level of unrealistic mentality to maintain such selfishness. Matsuricon's inconsistent roadmap has also been the subject of scrutiny, which John and his gang have been radio silent about any promises made versus promises broken. Here's a nutshell description of what someone that used to be the con's department head commented about. They were there from the beginning, but Matsuricon chose to be hostile and threw this individual under the bus, especially for budgetary reasons, and even shared about the staff's apparent lack of communication by saying they'll do better, but don't bother actually doing so. The displeasurement also happened when 2021 occurred and when they announced an online con, with one post informing the consumers to stay tuned, and shattering the hearts of many a few days later, to which their only justification was that the only way to run the con was with a limited space, but instead they chose not to run things in person. Now, around this time, it was normal for cons to stick to one announcement and one announcement only as to whether or not things should operate during 2021 after COVID's prime, especially months prior to the con's supposed release date. But with John and his team, it made people feel distasteful on them for making a fluff post followed by an official cancellation, giving the public consensus false hope that they'll come back swinging. But as damage control, they decided to host a mini-event at a park. So, I guess some improvement was made? However, said damage was already done. and many people were still appalled by nature. At its core, it's this fence sitting amongst other instances that have annoyed many of their fans, and people feel like they can no longer trust John and his team on being themselves when they're barely trying to help others. This is a glaring issue, especially as their presentation is based on that of a diverse level of mediums. But that's not the only time they shot themselves in the foot regarding the fluff post leading to a main post. When they ran operations again in 2022, they announced the lack of PCR tests and nickel and dimed their way to a certain degree in order to get the consumers to attend their con. And while it's understandable to keep others safe and to only allow vaccinated people in the vicinity, this is a glaring issue that needed to be planned thoroughly and coherently a while back. It's also normal for a handful of cancellations to occur via a follow-up post. But with John and his gang, it's become harder and harder to pinpoint what they want to do versus what they actually do. Even when people try to report about it publicly, such as convention reviews, he shares that communication was an issue for this year, we don't know why, regarding 2024, but multiple staff members told him this.
The reason I knocked off one point here is because there were a few times I needed to ask staff members who were in charge of certain sections for information about different things, yet the person who was put in charge of those areas didn't know the answer and also didn't know who to contact because they said, and I quote, "Communication is really bad among the staff this year. We have no idea what's going on." For most people, this isn't going to cause any issue, but I did find it a bit odd that multiple staff members told me this.
Now, I'm not sure what the reasoning behind this was from John and his gang's perspective, but nobody can hold Matsuricon accountable for any missteps, because when you do, they either make excuses, get really defensive, start ghosting people, or become passive-aggressive. And on top of being passive-aggressive, like when that one staffer called me selfish and short-sighted for COVID and the news fucking up my PTSD, not to use it as a shield here or anything, the cunts took it a step further. "I'm tired of people being cooped up because of selfish people refusing to take an extra step. Stay at home, wear a mask when you go out, reduce the spread of the disease when they're finally getting a read on asymptomatic carriers being as low as 25% of the total infected. It's not hard, but it's selfish to refuse to even try." Like I said about John, while it's fine to state concerns and facts about deadly viruses to others in a civilized manner, it's never okay to lash out at others who are not only scared of life-threatening events such as these, but are also looking for people to be courteous to others about venting their feelings to others, even if they're not lashing out in the public. Though it's not the only time Matsuricon lashed out in front of their consumers. This person in one of the Facebook reviews from 2022 wrote about the staff lying about badge pickup and the rude behavior received. And as a parent, they didn't validate that person's voice and called them a liar. At its core, it's this fence-sitting that has upset many of its supporters wanting to have a good and helpful time, though the lack of communication and mismanagement are two of Matsuricon's many issues in general. And John and his gang constantly talk about their moral support without holding themselves accountable for their own actions. So what happens when someone tries to help them out? Well, let's discuss that. So for 2024, former staffer and well-known TikTok cosplayer Hack talked about their experience at the Masquerade after debuting a Miku Hatsune cosplay that took a lot of time and effort to make. Hack was also victimized by one of Matsuricon's former cosplay staff for said person trying to get into the pants of others, just to put it lightly. And Matsuricon decided to remove that fucker after I spoke up about it. I find it weird that anyone who's been victimized by anyone decide to give them a second chance, especially if it's in an organization such as this. And I most certainly as hell wouldn't give an organization like this a second chance in that regard either, even after removal has been done. It's backwards as fuck to still keep that level of communication if you ask me. Anyway, in a deleted video of Hack's, they talk about the positives and negatives about the Masquerade and where the Miku outfit made its debut at, as one does with giving overall thoughts. Hack's criticisms were that of the misuse of the lighting, misuse of pronouns, the delay of the music from the audio-visual department, as well as them vaping behind the audio equipment, no water from the venue, the size of the room of the Masquerade being at full capacity, and the fact that Hack won Best in Show and won $100 rather than $400 from the year prior, and even mentioned that $70 was spent on curry and beers for Hack and their wife. Though I personally don't know any dishes where curry costs $25-ish per person. But while Hack was talking about the experience and venting their frustrations, Hack wasn't trying to be mean or malicious about it. In fact, the whole tone was upfront and honest, even when claiming they felt disrespected as a whole by John and his buddies. Many people in the comments section proceeded to voice their disdain about the con as well. So how does Matsuricon respond to this, especially in front of a public figure with 90,000 plus followers on TikTok? They wake the fuck up. And they do damage control. With a twist. According to Hack in a follow-up video that's still up, Matsuricon told Hack that the budget was more than expected as it didn't show up the weekend of the con, and was compensated for the $500 on top of 2 free badges. But what's weird is how Hack publicizes this afterwards.
In my experience, it's actually pretty unusual for a con to come to you and say, we are sorry, we messed up. That takes a lot of guts to do for a convention to admit that something went wrong. So I really appreciate them reaching out and being transparent and just talking to me and rectifying this situation. And this is not only good for me, but it's good for the other winners who were supposed to get more money than they actually got. Their prizes were supposed to be different, but there was some sort of miscommunication. So the other winners will also be getting what they were supposed to get, which is amazing. And I'm really excited for everyone else too. With Matsuricon being really transparent, apologizing, and making an effort, a real effort to fix the problem and like actually figuring this stuff out, I'm going to encourage you guys, if you're a competitive cosplayer, to go to Matsuricon next year. For all of the feedback that I gave, it was still a really well-organized show. The judges were professional. I didn't have to over-explain what I did. They knew what I was talking about. The staff was really warm and validating and wonderful. And like, honestly, with other competing cons on the same weekend, I would definitely encourage you to choose Matsuricon, given that they have shown that they actually do care about their cosplayers and they do care about putting on a good show and they do care about rewarding those who come and compete and put their all into their cosplays.
While it's normal to make mistakes, I've made mistakes myself and I'll probably continue to make more. With how Hack phrased things here, what I'm going to say is just speculation. It makes it look like John and his crew saw the previous video before, made Hack delete said video, and talk positively about them. Almost like it's a hush money kind of a thing, without it being 100% hush money. If I could think of any other way to describe it. And I'll get into the other instances where they pull this stunt later on. But what's weird is how anyone who's a former or current staffer of this con chooses to publicize posts in general, and gaslight the public. And speaking of gaslighting, while I appreciate Hack for being helpful in their cosplay tips as well as words of encouragement in the community, they were someone I had respect for at one point. And one of their bad habits is posting content not related to cosplay, in between posting misinformation such as the crimes of Anime Matsuri in Texas and Vic Mignogna, and saying everything those two have done are basically allegations, as well as talking about anti-woke video games. Videos such as these come up as inconsistent to the niche audience in this regard. As a result, Hack also posts both fluff bait and clickbait by nature. Around the time when OhioCon was facing backlash for the con chair's hostility towards the staff and the lack of self-awareness, Hack shared in one of their videos regarding the subject that Matsuricon got started because they didn't want to deal with Karen's bullshit. And for a slight foreshadow, they unfortunately followed suit. Before Hack gave Matsuricon a second chance, I actually DM'd them privately many times prior to help stand up for their voice regarding their abuser, and even congratulated them on their accomplishments. And they even called me a hero at one point as a result for calling John and his crew out on their bullshit. But years later, as of this year, by replying to a story Hack put out asking people to be interviewed at the con, I DM'd Hack to metaphorically go suck John's dick after they gave Matsuricon another chance. And also rephrasing a line from Shadow the Hedgehog to be witty, but it unfortunately fell on deaf ears. And Hack decided to say to me that I was villainizing shit. Eventually, Hack made a shitty video misrepresenting my experience with Matsuricon as well as my words with Hack.
For a little bit of backstory, I stopped going to a con because my abuser was on staff. My abuser is no longer on staff, so I am returning to that con. But there is a guy who thinks that every single con in our area is toxic, every cosplayer is toxic, and constantly just spits out words about his anger with his experiences at these cons, which really are just, he does not feel like they listened to him, and they blocked him after he started attacking them. That's what happened.
Bullshit.
So because my abuser is no longer on staff, I decided to go back to that con, a con that I've been going to for a very long time. I decided to go back, and I was really excited about it. So I announced on my Insta that I was going and went to Penn Station. I get this message. Didn't you talk about being victimized by one of those two-faced beta see you next Tuesdays many moons ago? Where's the damn common sense? Go suck the con chairs bits. I understand you're upset, but they have fixed the problem that I had with the con, and I'm giving it another chance because they fixed the thing that I had a problem with. The dude continued to melt down and say, like, he had to go to therapy because of the con blocking him on socials and whatever, and I sat there and I was like, it really sounds like you needed therapy anyways.
Bullshit!
First off, while those earlier videos I made from 2021 on TikTok were deleted, one of my friends who staffs for another con talked to me privately to contact John and Nicole via email before making more content. So I took their word of advice and even cooled my jets down while compiling an email that was on the lines of, hey, these are your guys' problems. If you stop doing these things, a lot of your problems would go away, while sharing criticism in a non-vile way. And John and Nicole chose to block me afterwards while being civil with them there. They, as a result, didn't take criticism, which leaves them no room for growth. Secondly, as I face scrutiny with former and current staffers, both on scenes and off scenes, their toxic, intense, and manipulative behavior are one of the many reasons why I'm in both talk therapy and EMDR altogether. Saying that being blocked led me to therapy and not providing any validation from victims is a false statement and selfish on your behalf. And finally, while I don't know every single nook and cranny about your communications with others, if any to begin with, there were DMs between us where, in a nutshell, you yourself said Matsuricon was disgusting, even before your abuser issue was fixed. To publicize this level of manipulation onto the audience like this, and label it as me abusing you to metaphorically go suck John's dick, is also disgusting on your behalf. And as a result of this, while Heck is a former staffer, they are a gaslighter, untrustworthy, and guilt-tripping in front of the audience to where it makes the other people cringe. People in the public eye are always open to criticism and validation to the consumers who put said people where they currently are, and they can even choose to make these public if possible. But to make it public and play the victim to the point of seeking internet clout and to make it cater towards not making everything at least 90% accurate for others, and you didn't, it's just asinine. And because of what Hack has done, I don't take anything back because that's metaphorically what they're doing. But regardless of their controversies they dug deeper holes into, John and his gang have their fans that share their support for them as previously mentioned. Many people who focus on the stuff that happens on scenes see them as an inspiration. With a following as decently sized as Matsuricon, John and his friends have the responsibility to, at the very least, not start hurtful things. Unfortunately, Matsuricon didn't live up to that responsibility when they ghosted a fan as they tweeted a mini-thread that's now privated about their behavior, especially when getting shafted responses while not instigating anything as they claim. This is an incredibly careless and selfish thing to do when someone is looking to voice their concerns to you for validation, let alone growth for the future. I understand when someone is feeling discomfort from not making their voices heard, they want someone who can listen. But to metaphorically sleep over people giving you genuine criticisms about the mishaps you've said and done is just awful. However, it's important to consider that John himself is also a man who wants to have moments of wanting to be in a bubblegum world, as do a lot of people in this dark world we live in.
A lot better than you right now.
But as I also said earlier on, he also needs to realize that he and his cult can't have their cake and eat it too. Even if he sugarcoats things in his interviews, that certainly doesn't excuse the carelessness of such statements. But given their current predicament and the fact they've talked about wanting to evolve as well while not doing so, it's possible he doesn't realize how misleading his words are. Many times he and his crew talk about their moral support to an unhealthy degree, especially in fluff posts that don't have anything to do with any updates on the con. The staff continuing to metaphorically sleep on things is already a red flag in and of itself, and it flies under the radar as the consumers have written about their poor management in general. Such as that time they originally had Derek Stephen Prince as a guest for 2023. But, much like Vic Mignogna, he is also a creep in the voice acting community. And after about 3 months of complaints from the consumers to remove him from the guest list, they rely on their damage control and not bother caring about the audience afterwards. Here are some comments from prior to the removal. Have you finished reviewing? For the safety of everyone, I think that he should be taken off the guest roster. Please. For how long? It's been without a single word from them. I'm starting to worry that it means he's still going to be there, unfortunately. Bro, that's the absolute worst. I honestly wish that if they don't take him off, they wouldn't have gave us false hope. And some from after, but from both a different person and Matsuricon themselves. So you're just going to delete my comment instead of responding? That's really professional. Hello. Your comment was deleted for language. We would also ask that you message us directly or continue to comment on the relevant post and not diminish our other guests' time in the spotlight by commenting on their announcements. I'm gonna translate that to fuck you, we're more important than you are. People, including myself, have directly reached out to you, including the victims themselves, and you have done absolutely nothing. So unless you tell us something other than we're looking into it, people are going to be upset about it. What's even weirder is the fact that Matsuricon doesn't take accountability to this in hand with their own staffers as to straight up be like, yes, let's remove the fucker, to basically taking any threat to the authorities. While there are threats that unfortunately happen in the con scene, it's baffling to see them like a see own it kind of policy that most retail spaces have, which even cosplayer SSN, the SSN meaning Survivors Support Network in this case, even made a clarification to their 4 out of 6 rating, with their biggest flaws being issues with staff and contact listed. And shared, we are concerned by Matsuricon will not involve itself in harassment claims unless they are reported at the time in which they occur. Staff members are available in the convention operations office at all times. We would like to remind Matsuricon that not all targets of harassment realize what's happening at the time, nor are all targets available to physically locate, or get to the convention's operations office after an incident like that. To think otherwise is willfully ignorant and sends a message that discourages targets from coming forward, which is especially dangerous considering staff, guests, etc. are not listed as being held accountable if they are the harasser. However, as of screen capping the similar statement on January 12th of this year, they originally had written, "We are concerned by Matsuricon's inclusion of all claims of harassment will be investigated and turned over to law enforcement if appropriate. We believe it implies to all claims will be turned over to law enforcement automatically, because many folks in the convention community are also from marginalized communities that are routinely discriminated against by law enforcement. They might not feel safe to report." And further down also wrote, "We are, however, heartened to see the see something, say something portion that used to be in the policy has been removed. Again, I must stress that using a see it, own it approach needs to be taken seriously. And it's possible Matsuricon doesn't know how hurtful and distasteful this change is to others. But it's not too different from when a narcissist tells someone to be on their side 24/7 to do everything they say and do, without question. Well, I guess that explains Matsuricon themselves as people. But to treat things like this and paint it in a positive light with no validation from any victims is beyond me and baffling. And there's also this TikTok of someone calling out a creepy Shinji cosplayer from Neon Genesis Evangelion, which, according to this person, reported him to Matsuricon, but they chose not to remove him and ghost this person's reporting, letting said creep roam around scot-free. As a result, Matsuricon contradicts even their own policy. And speaking of contradictions, there's this part from Anime on Location's interview where Cameron interviews John himself.
Any final message you would love to give to the fans of Matsuricon for coming out this weekend, donating to charity, watching all of our programming, interacting with all of our guests?
Well, I think, honestly, as you see Matsuricon, it eventually grows. Even during the period of COVID, we retracted back a little bit. We're actually growing, but again, this is all because of the fans actually continually supporting us. And, you know, as we get more fans coming in, and actually coming into the convention and enjoying it, we're actually be able to grow and do more things. So I would say, you know, always bring a couple friends with us and grow with us. And as we grow, we'll be able to do more with the con.
Like the post I shared where he thanked his fans and as well as people associated with Final Fantasy. He's shifting an unhealthy responsibility to his audience, whether he knows it or not. He's basically saying that if he and his staff should grow, you should tell others to attend the con. So if they get more people in, that will make them evolve. The underlining implication I get with other stuff shared prior to the point is that if you stop supporting Matsuricon and choose to believe things they don't want you to, then you'd be responsible for the metaphorical damages done. One of the important reasons to analyze this is because of the ripple effects that being guilt-tripped and gaslighted by others has on the victimized. When one deals with such manipulation, it doesn't just negatively impact their own mindsets and behavior, it also impacts the people closest to them. And if it turns out that John and his staff are using manipulative and explosive tactics to get what they want, then it would be harder for people to share their experiences on these people and paint them in a positive light. It's literally the equivalent of running a retail store, letting your employees be as verbally hostile and metaphorically blind as the boss with all that's going downhill, and expecting people to continue supporting you when you've scared your customers away. It was all because of the actions from the employees. As a result, Matsuricon has caused all of life's problems and continues to beg people to give them support via volunteer work or attend events of all sizes. And if they keep behaving like this in an intense nature for future years to come, it's going to be short-lived. Personally, regarding what John said about growing, I'm not sure if he's telling the truth or not. But while people have commented on their mismanagement and unprofessionalism, especially on the Facebook reviews, the family-friendly persona being the personality and John and his gang being the character, this is what happens when they play a character like this. And by default, it's a completely separate and deceptive personality. There's also this post from when they announced they were advertising their con at Animarathon, and in the comments section of the post on Facebook, shared about a racial slur that's super close to homophobe. I'm not going to say it here for obvious reasons. And I'm not sure what the ribbon looked like, but the evidence in the comments section on this post is still damning. And yet again, because damage control removes the ribbon, even if other people saw the ribbon prior to the removal and whether or not people have a first impression on you, it doesn't automatically mean they're going to give your event a chance when they see oopsies like this. If anything, it's not going to increase your moral support at the slightest. But the weirdest thing is how they treat other former staffers or community members. There's even this post from one of their former photographers that applied for 1 year but was denied due to quote-unquote several reports of discriminatory conduct, both professionally and publicly, that don't meet the criteria. And while there wasn't anything I saw, even them emailing about the situation asking for proof, nothing was given in exchange. But why spread misinformation to one of your community members, whether long time or not, even in a private manner? Again, the majority of criticisms stem from the many instances of manipulation, and how they metaphorically sleep on all these issues. These are both issues covered on my thread on Twitter from the stuff I've succumbed to as a former consumer. And while it gained some amount of traction, as well as other comments about Matsuricon, John and his gang haven't been taking it well. Not enough staff and was very confusing, was poorly ran and was chaotic in general. Not very happy. Matsuri has always been good, but this year was awful. The staff had no idea what was going on and made large promises they couldn't keep. They couldn't regulate anything and made the experience horrible. By far the worst year. If a guest is not on the schedule for signings, there's an off chance the guest won't show up at all for autographs. We drove down to meet one of the guests, only to find out he was only doing it during the scheduled times. Staff could not tell us when he was signing, only that the free schedule autograph was tomorrow, which we didn't care. We wanted to pay and go since we drove from out of state. We were told to go to the dealer's room to see if he shows up. We stayed until it was time for his panel to see if maybe he would show up, and nothing. Asked staff members, messaged their Facebook page, commented on the guest page to see when they would be signing in the dealer's room, and crickets. First and last time coming to this con. Most guests will at least do paid autographs at least once the day they are scheduled to appear. Waste of money to drive there, and on top of that, the $120 we spent on tickets to get in, which we didn't even see the guest we paid to come see. Felt like a waste, super disappointing, never again. I suggest anyone inquires about autographs if they are there to meet a guest where one of the free autographs isn't on the day you're attending. Holy fuck, that read was a mouthful. And that's just a handful of the negative reviews. But what's just as weird is them constantly sharing posts being like, hey, please volunteer for us, please volunteer for us. I know we scarred some people, but please give us another chance. Almost like they're Walmart asking people, how would you like to save $200 on your energy bill?
Excuse me?
I'm sick of this boomerang. But a red flag that's been public is Nicole nonchalantly shared in an interview from 2022 that they had new staff for obvious reasons.
But I'm so excited. We have a lot of new staff, just for many different various reasons. And I'm so excited. We have some of the best staff.
Those reasons are probably from my now deleted callouts from 2021 and some of their now former staff I've talked about earlier on as well. But who am I to read minds to? But when someone reveals their skeletons from on-scenes, behind-the-scenes, or both, Matsuricon lets their toxicity and fragility show. Or in John's case, straight up laugh at things. Such as the time he stumbled across my thread by saying, "Apparently I have a stalker, and it's quite hilarious." And a few days later, John also doubled, tripled, quadrupled, quintupled, sextupled, whatever 7 is, sextupled down, and gaslit his cult by also writing on his Instagram, "Have you ever seen a veiled threat directed to you on another social media platform, but the only way you found out is through another account you use for advertising marketing purposes? And the person has your personal account blocked?" Shrug. "Oh, so you're using the Butch Hartman method of ego-stroking narcissism while deflecting criticism."
So I look at people that critique as weak. Weak rhymes with critique. So, you know, if you're going to critique like, hey, this is never going to work or whatever, then I just say, you know what, let's see you try it, and then we'll see how you do.
Very classy move, John. I swear these people make it like they're Dennis and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and sets up a whole bunch of chaos to go their way for hours upon hours upon hours each day. To claim someone venting their scars publicly is both the stalker and a veiled threat in front of your cult following is also a gross thing to share, even to people in your circles, John. As I said earlier on, you can't have your fucking cake and eat it too. When someone who's damaged through hell and back and decides to vent publicly about their abusers, regardless of the severity, and laughing at their scars people have received, makes you a shitty person by default. And anyone telling people with a mental illness of any sorts to let it go, especially in a time period where the assistance of mental health is so fucking high, it's equivalent to telling that of a handicapped person to get up and walk it out. It's just a line you don't cross. If someone pulled all the bald references in the book, whether cancer-related or not, you should have the common sense to know that it's probably hurtful to you, and even while facing some of the trauma you've succumbed to while getting the treatment needed to make you where you are today, it could also be triggering to you in a sense. And it's also hurtful to others as well. Hell, even Linus defended a girl that dealt with leukemia and called out this little cum stain of a character for talking shit to said girl. You should be aware of what kind of impact your words have on other people. That is not how validation from others works, especially in a union and non-union environment such as this.
Think about it! Or don't you ever think about anything!
Okay, rant over. As previously mentioned, John has also said that many times he wants to evolve from a guest perspective, but it takes a lot financially to get that stuff to happen. This is another common issue with Matsuricon. They have the need to say that they're gonna do this and that and try to evolve, but they don't meet those expectations. There's also this comment I found on a Reddit post from the thread, "Matsuricon may be a no-go this year," and this was from 10 years ago. To which one of the people commented below, "I remember when myself and several of the other department heads were discussing the fallout of there after Nicole threw a hissy fit when you and your friends couldn't run the 18+ Homestuck panel because, you know, you weren't 18. Also, I find it 100 million plus % hilarious that you think no one from Matsuricon actually makes money. You know, the reason we started that group was because we thought the chairs were stealing money from the convention, but eventually we find out that convention actually just wasn't a registered business. Actually hadn't filed taxes in 6 years and had been funding their living costs for the entirety of that duration. So much for non-profit. Do you really think Nicole makes a living wage selling Mary Kay cosmetics? You know, she actually lost a lot of top-notch staff members by convincing them to sell that shit for her, and they all went in debt because of it? It amazes me how well they have you guys trained to sniff out criticism on the internet and defend them. Your Facebook page is filled with people asking honest questions and getting a new asshole ripped by the staff and departments completely unrelated to the ones being asked about. What's great is every year goes horribly wrong for staff. People leave because of it, and then your chairs blame it on the people who walked and throw them under the bus. I wonder how long it's gonna take your generation of staff to realize the people running the con are the ones making it awful and pocketing all the proceeds from it. Lol. And while John did say this in a 2023 interview with Cameron of Anime on Location,
I think we did an overhaul for our charity event this year, so I'm hoping that people will actually turn out in the charity area, and especially at the end of the con, when we actually do our normal auction.
We have special one-of-a-kind items that we will be auctioning off in the name of charity. All proceeds again will go to Pelotonia at the OSU James Cancer Research Hospital. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone show up and actually putting down money and just throwing it on stage. That's all we ask for. Just throw your money on stage. It's okay. You don't need anything. Just you're not going to really use it. You're not spending anything. Just throw it on the stage. That's all we need.
Which is the closest thing I could think of regarding to the Reddit comment. Whether or not the dono money is actually being pocketed and that Mary Kay stuff was used to make a quick buck is beyond my own personal knowledge, but it's still wild behavior regardless. And to wrap things up, there's an issue that was brushed aside in the public sphere with a local business called Warp Speed Printing, or WSP for short. They help provide printing services between banners, pins, laminated badges, pamphlets, etc., for cons and for personal businesses alike. And when it comes to a con preparing some basic goodies for the attendees, you gotta have that stuff prepared. They were up for helping Matsuricon in that regard. But you might be asking, how did everything hold up? 3 words. Small claims court. Above the screen cap of the file for the small claims court, WSP claimed Matsuricon ran up the bill and defrauded them by not willing to pay up for their services, in which it was being settled for $6,000 worth of a fee. And while writing in a comment thanking people for siding with them, WSP had to deal with 9 months of defrauding their services, up to filing 35 exhibits and 70 pages of evidence to back their claim. Unfortunately, John pulls a get-out-of-jail-free card from his stick and makes WSP publicly take the knee, especially in front of a judge. While it's normal to make mistakes, people should be clear that regardless of who's at fault, this is beyond a mistake. This is more of a career-ending move for something as shady as this. And keep in mind, I'm only summarizing what WSP said prior to the small claims court. When the word started to spread, the consensus was mixed. People such as myself were defending WSP, while the delusional people sided with John and friends. It's even ironic that while John shares his thanks to his consumers for his supposed family-friendly event, there are these screen caps of them liking tweets regarding something spicy as well as keeping OhioCon in their good graces. And they're also following OhioCon on Blue Sky as well. So to make you and your people pass that level of metaphorical blindness and verbal hostility from what OhioCon's con chair has done is also a red flag on your guys' behalf. But if you don't believe anything WSP has reported is true because there's not enough receipts to show, especially publicly, I don't know what else to tell you guys. Though you can imply the same thing to anything Matsuricon says and does, even with the evidence here being damning. So how do we know Matsuricon is at fault without them holding themselves accountable? At the end of the day, Matsuricon is an interesting con to talk about, with new controversial details and chapters being added year after year after year. Whether you believe John and his former and current staff are entitled, selfish manipulators, or just a group of people feeling mentally and creatively drained from operating this show for nearly 2 decades straight, they continue to let mishaps slide left and right. And even with people like me dealing with their hostility and gaslighting, networking with those people, hack included, are one of the many reasons I quit cosplay. But I don't want anyone walking in here to assume conventions are automatically bad. Not every convention is bad, but this is an intense case of unprofessionalism that shouldn't have happened from staff. Though it does make you question the staff in general with how things run, especially with how the con scene is going nowadays. And while other cons also suffer from kerfuffles, videos like this are something I don't plan on doing for the future or really ever again. I'd rather network with other consumers that don't guilt people into giving them support, but if I dare network with staff that may or may not have dirty laundry piled up, well, I'm gonna use the Joseph Joestar all or nothing gambit. Realistically though, all you can do is look into these facts with your own judgment, but what's the point of giving people like them a second chance if they've lost their ways and rest on their laurels in front of their community that they themselves have built from the ground up? What difference does it make if Matsuricon isn't who they thought they once were? Throughout the years, Matsuricon has gained an audience and left an impact on many with their donations to cancer research and general sympathy. Many people still see them as an inspirational group and has made their words hold weight to them. That's important to think back about the impact John and others have made onto those people. Nobody expects anybody in the public eye to be an S-tier role model, but it's also important to keep in mind that human lives are more important than peace and justice, and everything that's transpired. Nothing has been more clear as crystal than this. John Holscher, Nicole Buchanan, Hack, and the past and present staff of Matsuricon need to do better. Not only for themselves and their audience, but for the rest of humanity. Until then, I'm gonna continue my 2 forms of therapy, and I'll see you guys next time. Jana.